watching the News 6 Network.
We can tell you that the one shot was heard coming from the woods behind the Ponderosa restaurant at about 8 o'clock this evening.
This is a very unusual incident for this community. Someone being shot for no apparent reason and from some type of a stealth position.
Deborah, from the moment that we came out here, I can tell you it was the biggest police presence I have ever seen in Central Virginia.
On October 19, 2002, a terror spree that began 2.5 weeks earlier in Maryland arrived at the doorstep of Richmond. While walking across the parking lot of the Ponderosa Steakhouse in Ashland, a Florida man named Jeffrey Hopper was shot in the abdomen and critically wounded. An attack that bore all the hallmarks of the serial sniper.
We are acting as if it is. We will continue on that mode until we know that it is not.
Days later, assumption becomes reality.
Can and do confirm at this time that the ballistics evidence recovered during our investigation has been matched with the other shooting cases.
I tell you, it was a lot of good police work done.
At the time, Colonel Stuart Cook was the sheriff of Hanover County.
Everybody was on edge. It was frightening times. I mean, as I said, for everybody, law enforcement included.
And he had already started getting ready for the worst, well before John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo showed up in Ashland.
As the shootings continued, it looked like the jurisdictions hadn't had a whole lot of cooperation with each other. So I called Dave and said, Dave, we need to get a plan together for the Richmond metropolitan area, because if a sniper comes, we need to be prepared for it.
Current Hanover Sheriff Dave Hines was Cook's right-hand man.
There wouldn't be any question as to who was going to be in charge where it happened, as well as how many people can we bring in? What assets are we going to bring in?
We only finished that plan like a day before the sniper actually shot the individual at the Ponderosa in the town of Ashland.
Once that happened, Cook became the head of a newly formed Richmond Area Sniper Task Force.
We were descended upon not just by law enforcement. We had the national media down there, and that was a big mess.
And he made it known his team was going to operate differently.
We weren't going to do what they were doing in Northern Virginia. That if we have something to give you that will help us clear this case and put the citizens at ease, we're going to give it to you. But until then, we're not coming back out here and talking to you every 30 to 45 minutes just to have a dog and pony show.
The task force mission: solve the Ponderosa case and protect the community from another attack. Top of mind for everyone, the safety of schools and children.
Because our kids were afraid, because they were afraid because of the reaction that their parents were having, and it was warranted.
So Cook prioritized boots on the ground police work, which received almost immediate praise.
The sheriff's leadership has been critical to this investigation. Everyone has been very impressed with the prompt response and investigative expertise demonstrated by you and your people.
Case in point, the way they handled the Ponderosa scene.
One of the things that we were most keen and most concerned about was the integrity of the crime scene and the protection and chain of custody of the evidence. And our men with the town of Ashland sealed that crime scene down like that.
From the bullet shell casing to a letter from the snipers that had been found tacked to a tree. The evidence found outside the Ponderosa would prove critical to solving this case and later prosecuting Muhammad and Malvo. That's why Cook and his deputies processed everything.
You had the FBI coming down from D.C., the Secret Service, DEA, all of those people were coming, but we wouldn't let them into the crime scene.
A decision he says rubbed some federal agents the wrong way, but something he knew was the right call.
Investigators actually flew on the helicopters up to those respective labs with the evidence. They signed it over to them. There was never a question about who had it, how was it handled, and so that really prevailed in court in later cases.
2 decades have now passed since the Ponderosa shooting, but Cook and Hines still vividly recall how their deputies and their community responded with vigilance and gratitude.
Everybody was saying, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. They were thanking law enforcement officers for shutting an interstate down because that was the fear that had gone across the entire East Coast.
Exactly 2 years after the attacks, the United States Department of Justice released reports detailing the lessons learned from the sniper investigation. Colonel Cook's task force received high marks for how they handled the evidence and for how they worked with the media on scene. In Ashland, John Burkett, CBS 6 News. West Broad Street and Parham Road, one of the busiest intersections in Henrico County. For a half-century, there's been an Exxon station at this corner. 20 years ago, it made national headline, and it had nothing to do with gas prices.
It's getting close to home now.
Everybody's scared, basically, you know.
It's amazing that he could be just so close to where I'm at.
I think it's a very bold statement. I think he's basically showing the police that, you know, you can't stop me, you can't catch me, and he's almost challenging them, it seems.
On October 21st, 2002, the serial snipers who had thrown our region into a state of panic made a stop right here. No shots were fired, but they did make a phone call. 48 hours after the shooting at the Ponderosa Steakhouse in Ashland, the shooters dialed up the Sniper Task Force in Maryland. That call was traced to the Richmond area. Retired Assistant Henrico Police Chief Jim Fitzgerald, then a lieutenant, was driving to work that morning when he heard something over the scanner.
Communications came on and said that there was possible sighting of the suspects at Parham and Broad.
He arrived at the intersection just moments later.
And I looked over to my left, and I noticed there's a white van sitting beside the telephone.
At the time, it was believed that the sniper could be driving a white van or a box truck.
I called it in, then I pulled the call up on my computer in the car, and I could see that the return number was a 301 area code, which I knew was in Maryland, obviously.
Fitzgerald then got himself into position to get a better look.
So that's when I went down here, made the U-turn, came up.
You parked over here.
I parked right here. Then that's when the command post called me for an update.
A SWAT team had already gathered nearby, and the FBI told Fitzgerald to send them in. The officers moved quickly. 2 men were arrested, and the payphone was uprooted and taken to FBI headquarters.
Our forensics unit removed the actual guts of the phone for processing.
A short time later, the gas station is crawling with law enforcement and media, and a live news conference is broadcast across the country.
2 male subjects were taken into custody by the members of the Richmond Area Task Force at Parham Road and Broad Street.
For the first time, there's hope that the shooting spree has come to an end. But 10 hours later, we learned that the men arrested were not the snipers.
These men have been turned over to representatives of the Immigration and Naturalization Services for further action. No local charges have been placed.
While either John Allen Muhammad or Lee Boyd Malveaux made that call, they were gone by the time police arrived on scene. But they were probably still close by. Very close.
We also didn't know which phone they were at, because the call basically said possibly at the phone or even on the phone. Well, there's also immediately across the street was a Citgo station. It also had drive-up phones. As it turned out, after the fact, with the actual number, they actually called from the Citgo station, not from the Exxon station.
A brazen game of cat and mouse, especially considering this gas station is less than half a mile from Henrico Police headquarters.
Public safety building was put into immediate lockdown.
In the 2 decades that have passed since the sniper attacks, a number of new revelations have come to light, including a close call involving another Henrico officer and the snipers. Just 1 day before the payphone call, a patrolman spotted a suspicious-looking blue Chevy Caprice traveling down Broad Street, just blocks from this Exxon.
And he just had that instinct that there's, something with this car. We didn't have that information because we weren't looking for a blue Caprice. We weren't looking for that car. And the officer most likely probably would have continued to follow, but he was diverted to an alarm, a school alarm. And again, that's another, just like almost every investigation, weeks afterwards, people start talking about, I saw that car, or I did this, so what we know today, 20 years later, we didn't know at the time. What we know now is that, yes, we had an Henrico officer right behind the car.
And it turns out the snipers are spotted at a different part of the West End right around the same time. I spoke to a woman shortly after their arrest that told me she ran into John Muhammad inside the Food Lion at Tuckernuck, and he randomly asked her a question if she knew anything about the serial snipers. In the West End, John Burkett, CBS 6 News.
In October of 2002, police and federal agents were searching for a serial sniper who had struck fear into the hearts of people from Montgomery County, Maryland to Metro Richmond. During this time, the public was asked to keep their eyes open for 2 possible getaway vehicles.
Saturday night, authorities released these composite sketches of a white delivery-type box truck seen near 2 of the earlier shootings. Police are also hunting a white Chevy Astro van seen speeding away from Friday's shooting.
We later learned the 2 men responsible for the shootings had been traveling in a much different-looking car, one that had been spotted in Central Virginia just 2 weeks before the killing spree began.
You never know who or what you're going to run into.
Jerome George is a part-time deputy with the Hopewell Sheriff's Office. It was September 19th, just after 4 in the morning, but 20 years ago, he wore a different badge.
I was a patrolman, police officer here in the city of Petersburg.
And there's one day on the job he'll never forget.
I received a call for service approximately 4:30 a.m. in reference to a suspicious vehicle.
At the time, this field of grass off Washington Street was the parking lot for a hotel overlooking Interstate 95. Due to a dorm room shortage, the building was housing students from Virginia State University. But that morning, security noticed a car that was not supposed to be there.
Sitting in the parking lot right here. It was backed in at this parking spot right here.
There was a lot of clothing in the back seat. I do remember that very well.
A blue Chevrolet Caprice with out-of-state tags.
Their license plates, I do remember that they were New Jersey.
And 2 people inside.
I did make contact with both individuals, and I do remember specifically that the driver was actually asleep. The passenger was actually, he was on a laptop computer.
George woke up the driver, who was polite and cooperative.
It didn't give no trouble at all, gave no indications of any type of illegal, suspicious activities. They just said they were tired, they were traveling
north from Louisiana, and he was going to see relatives in Maryland.
No suspicion?
No suspicion. I just wanted to check on his well-being. You got to understand, out here in Petersburg, you got 2 major interstates. You have 85 and you got Interstate 95. It's not uncommon to see individuals pull off to the side of the road into a parking lot, you know, to get some rest.
George ran a warrant check on the vehicle and the driver, and both came back negative. The officer told them to be safe and went back on patrol. 13 days later, the sniper shootings began.
As a matter of fact, I even pulled over a couple white vans during the time, with probable cause, of course.
On October 24th, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo were captured at a rest stop in Maryland in a blue Chevy Caprice.
After they were caught, it was like worldwide. Everybody was watching the news.
Once he saw their photos on TV and learned about their car, George immediately checked his notes.
By some chance, I just looked at the car and I remember writing down the name of the driver specifically.
The driver's name was John Allen Muhammad.
My mouth dropped.
George told his supervisor, who had him type up a detailed report, which was then sent to federal investigators.
Our department did forward my findings to them, but I never heard anything back from them.
Before he became a police officer, George served in the United States Navy. Like Muhammad, he was a veteran of Desert Storm. To this day, he cannot understand how someone who once swore to protect our country against all enemies, foreign or domestic, could have done something so evil.
It's sad. I really don't have any other word about it. I wish that I could have done more, sir.
A chance meeting in a dark parking lot, something Jerome George will never forget. Working for you in Petersburg, Wayne Koval, CBS 6 News.